Well, hello there and a very warm welcome to Ask the Expert, QuickBooks live show to help small businesses and sole traders just like you. My name is Aaron Patrick and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you today. I'm a chartered accountant, a QuickBooks certified trainer, owner of a state-of-the-art accounting firm called Boffix, which is the best in cloud-based technology to help small businesses get crucial real-time information at their fingertips. Also, I have a dedicated YouTube channel all on the world of QuickBooks. If you want any more QuickBooks tips and tricks, then why not drop me a follow? Today, we're taking a deep dive into self-assessment. It's January, and for many of us, that means the dreaded self-assessment season. If you're filing for the first time or feeling a little bit outnumbered when it comes to self-assessment, then we are here to help. Let's quickly cover the basis before we jump in. And we're all on the same page. So what is a tax return, first of all? Well, in the UK, some people have to complete a tax return each and every year. This is a form that will declare all your income and capital gains for that tax year. You can also use the form to claim taxable reliefs and some allowances as well. You send the form to HMRC via online, but in some cases via paper as well. But who needs to file? Well, in the UK, not everyone needs to complete a tax return. In fact, if you only ever get paid via payroll, chances are you'll never need to complete a tax return at all. However, you must send a tax return if in the last tax year, any of the following situations applied. Number one, were you or are you self-employed as a sole trader, which is best described as you've got some form of business? Were you buying, selling, or have contracting or anything like that? And crucially, and this is the important bit, did you earn more than £1,000 in a given tax year? Well, important to note that that's the amount you've sold and not the profit, so not how much you've typically made. That's the top figure. So if you've earned more than £1,000 and classed as a sole trader, then you will have to complete a tax return in that given tax year. Also, were you partner of a business partnership, or do you have any rental property? They're also ones where you see yourself getting caught out the most. And if you are taking rent from a property, especially if it's on a second property, then typically that's a catalyst for a requirement for you to actually need to complete a return. So keep an eye out for it. And then the fourth one is if you've earned over £100,000, or if you claim tax child credits and you hit the thresholds, then you may need to look and get yourself into getting a tax return as well. The other bit that catches people out could be if you've had untaxed income. So if you think about having any forms of dividends from your business, then that could be a reason for you to go and get yourself into a tax return. Now, this list isn't extensive, and there are other forms that can actually hit you and make you have a requirement for due tax returns. So I would personally recommend you consult with an accountant or HMRC themselves if you are unsure at all. Okay, so we now need to know, or we now know when you need to file, but which tax year does it relate to? Well, the tax year runs from the 6th of April to the 5th of April, and it keeps running time and time again. So the tax year we're going to be talking about in today's video and webinar is about the 6th of April 2021 all the way to the 5th of April 2022, with a deadline of both to submit your tax return and to pay any taxes on the 31st of January 2023. That's only 14 days to go, which is just over 340 hours. Not that I'm counting, but it's not far away. So for those watching live across YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, please do share any questions you have in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them later in the show. And I won't be answering your questions alone. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Fer, who is the Senior Product Manager at Intuit QuickBooks. Good afternoon, Fer. First of all, can you tell us all a little bit about yourself and what you do at QuickBooks?
Yeah, hi, Aaron. Thank you very much for having me. As you say, my name is Fernando. I'm a product manager at our accounting and tax team. And what that basically means is that we look at accounting and tax features that help all our clients across all our products. So starting from QuickBooks Self-Employed all the way to QuickBooks Advanced. My role as a product manager has been focused mostly on self-assessment and ITSA as well. And basically, the product manager on a day-to-day basis works very close to our customers. So we talk, review feedback, and develop basically the strategy for the product as well as new features. But we also improve the features that we currently have. And that basically allows me to work very closely to all our teams, design, product development, customer success, all of the teams that basically make QuickBooks that help us deliver great products to our customers.
Amazing, amazing. So while we wait for the first questions to come in, let's talk about how QuickBooks can help users get peace of mind from self-assessment. Have you got any kind of tips and tricks for them?
Yeah, obviously the most obvious one would be keeping track of your expenses, right? We know that when it comes to self-assessment, it's very important to know obviously how much you've paid on the business, but also how much you've spent on allowable expenses. And QuickBooks will allow you to track a lot of that quite easily as we could talk in more depth. The second bit is taking away all the guesswork. When it comes to, especially for sole traders and landlords, like you've described earlier in your introduction, it is quite sometimes very difficult to understand how the expenses that you basically associate with your business map into the SA 103 or SA 105 return. And we basically automate a lot of that in our products. So if you put all your income and expenses, it will be automatically mapped for the customer under what we call our income tax estimator, which will basically literally tell you the figures that you need to put into your return. So super simple. And then the third bit that we do when it comes to self-assessment is taking a lot of the guesswork out when it comes to how much you owe. So we take into consideration all the figures that you provide and that basically that mapping that I referred to. And we do an estimate of how much income tax you'll be paying for the business that you set up in QuickBooks. At the end of the year, many are taken into consideration when you have to calculate that final figure of how much you have to pay to HMRC. And we know that a lot of that will come when you complete all the information on your self-assessment. But it's very handy for our customers to at least know the high-level figure of their business in QuickBooks. So that's also something that we can actually provide from software.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's just how simple the software is. At the end of the day, you can tell it was definitely built with the end user in mind. And I think that really does show when you come to get that confidence, isn't it? Because that way they can see and they know when they're putting information into QuickBooks that it's going to come out right at the end. And I also have to emphasize how important and a game changer that tax and an I calculator you just mentioned was. The idea that at any point in a year, a user can go and find out what their tax figure is going to be is an absolute game changer in my eyes. And I think that's really is ways in which people can get confidence, can't it? Because they can see every time they may put a new expense in, how that's going to affect, or they've taken on this new piece of work and that new piece of work's brought an X amount of income in, and they can see in real time how much their tax figure has been affected by that. So yeah,
absolutely.
Completely. I think it works really well. All right, let's go to another question then. So how can QuickBooks help users keep things simple?
So I guess the first thing that we do is almost like help you track very accurately your business finances, right? So whether you have transactions, invoices, expenses, ensure that a lot of that is quite intuitive within QuickBooks. So whether you're a very small business and you need a very small solution or simple solution, which is QuickBooks Self-Employed, or you have more complex need, the product has been built the needs of customers and making that experience very, very simple. The thing that we like the most is having to take business, like having businesses focus on what they really need, which is basically the growth of their business and less on admin. So we have a lot of ways to basically streamline the admin work through automation. So you can set up rules. Well, the first thing that everyone should do is basically set up a bank account and connect that to QuickBooks, which streamlines all the transactions from that bank account. And then from there, you can do so much. You can automate a lot of transactions, which basically is quite effortless. And then you can create rules based on obviously what the type of income and expenses that are coming in or going out that will basically categorize all of that for you. You can also work very closely with your accountant. So with people like yourself, Aaron, basically you can give access to an accountant, which will do a lot of that for you. But also you can then start to interact with your accountant through software. So the accountant will come in, do certain things. They can notify you about things that need to be reviewed. And then you can basically continue with that flow quite easily from our products. And I think one of the areas that we're also quite excited is we know that a business sometimes, especially for small businesses, is on the go. So you have a lot of things that you can access from your mobile app. Especially, I want to highlight two. The first one is Mileage Tracker. So you can set up tracking the miles that basically are associated with your business quite easily from our mobile app. It will calculate all those journeys for you, and then it will basically create all of that data for you within our product. And then the second bit is Receipt Catcher. So we know that accountants particularly sometimes struggle with how many paper receipts they might receive from their customers. Well, of that pain is basically, it goes away when you can take a snapshot from your phone, whether you use iOS, Apple, or Android. You take a photo, it reads all of the information in that receipt and basically helps you categorize it to the right place. So a lot of that is super simple, and all of this just saves you a lot of time at the end of the year, because you can do a lot of all of this throughout the year. So when it comes to the end, it's just basically reviewing the figures, making sure that there are no accounting mistakes there, working closely with your accountant, and then just being ready to file.
Yeah, completely. Completely support that statement of it saving so much time. I mean, if anyone's out there have had to analyze out a bank account from scratch, then just the bank feed alone will completely change the way that you do bookkeeping going forward. Just having all that data just flow in perfectly gives you a chance to have that confidence that it's much quicker and also much more accurate as well. So absolute game changer in my eyes. And also that power of the mobile phone. It's amazing how many of our clients that we have run their whole business just on that mobile app. You said some great things there about how it's got the receipt capture and mileage tracker, but you can run pretty much your whole business from that app as well. And I think, once people see that and see how powerful it is, they're never going to go back to your standard way of doing bookkeeping going forward.
Yeah.
Okay, Fer, let's go to the next question then. So how can QuickBooks users feel confident in their expenses?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes to just identifying error and mistakes before you actually file and before you translate those figures to HMRC. And we've done a lot of work in this area, and we're quite excited particularly on the usage of AI that we have within product. This might sound quite futuristic, and obviously it's a trending topic these days when you see a lot of what's been launched recently. But the truth is that when it comes to customer information of their business, we can understand so much and help them identify potential errors. So one of the things that we've launched in this year is basically a tool, a widget that will prompt customers of potential errors in their books based on information of business similar to them. So what we can do is a comparison and understand, well, you are a sole trader of the size and that basically generates all this income and expenses on an annual basis. And there are all these other businesses that and we can see that these few categories, they just might not look right. So you might want to have a look at those. So we flag that on our income tax estimator. If relevant, it can also tell you that you are perfectly on track. And we've already seen great feedback from our customers, because there's been situations where we get these statements, well, we've identified this expense was just in the right category, or I had associated this expense on the wrong tax year, which obviously could lead to significant errors with your return. So we want to continue to explore how AI can help our business, but we know that we definitely have a good ground base when it comes to the way that we are benchmarking and flagging that information to the customer when preparing for self-assessment.
Yeah, and the AI is so powerful. I know we've used some of the aspects of it before, and we've seen some major mistakes have been spotted by the AI itself. And that just gives you confidence, doesn't it, and shows you how that is option there. And there's tools within QuickBooks as well. You've got bank reconciliation. That means that you can make sure that your bank agrees to exactly what's in your bank agrees in QuickBooks to what's in the actual bank itself. That alone is something that can just give that confidence and that ability for people to understand that that whatever their final result's going to be for that tax return is going to be correct. And just as a practical one as well, just thinking about AI and thinking about keeping an eye, don't forget you've got opportunities like profit and loss by month. So a report within QuickBooks where straight away you can see month by month all your different expense and income categories. And just something as simple a report as that can be a perfect way for you to be able to spot if there's any mistakes as well. So you've got the AI, you've got all the reports, you've got all of the options there. There's a lot of tools and solutions in QuickBooks to give you confidence that everything's going to be absolutely spot on. Okay, we've got one more, I think, on this subject. So what support is available for QuickBooks customers for?
So I think this is probably what we're most proud of. We have not a 5, but a multiple 6-star plus customer support team that is always available for our customers if they need it. So whether it's through the phone or through chat, you can actually share your screen. You always have someone ready to support you if there are issues or questions regarding your product. But more importantly, we know that a lot of the what scares the most our customers is when they are getting started. And we appreciate that, right? Like QuickBooks, getting started in QuickBooks from the very beginning might feel overwhelming. You have to set up your bank account. You can start setting up those roles. We want to make sure that that's super easy. And that's why we've recently launched what we call our onboarding support, which will give customers 45 minutes with a specialist after they basically joined us. And that session is fully set up to help you get ready with your business, and particularly if it's now the time, also with self-assessment. So our customer support agents will help you really understand how much you can get out of a product, get it ready for your needs, so that you can from there basically run and do it on your own. Obviously, consider that you will always have them available if required.
Yeah, I love the onboarding talks with them. I know a lot of clients have found that really useful to get them off and running. And don't forget, you've got shows like this. So if you have any questions, then please do use the comment section and we'll make sure we get to them as well. But if you do need any more advice, then there's also that QuickBooks SMB community group as well on Facebook. So you've got plenty of ways in which you can get supported. So yeah, like Fer said, it's something that QuickBooks and Intuit are very proud of. And you should be able to feel very, very much supported. All right, we're going to move on to a different talking point now. So, you know, as a reminder, if you have any questions about self-assessment at all, or if you are feeling outnumbered, then we are here to help. So we're taking questions from YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. So do get them in, and we're looking forward to getting some questions. It's by far my favorite part about these little sessions is when you guys put some questions in. So please do use this opportunity to get those questions answered. Both me and Fer are waiting to answer them. We've also had some questions in over the last few weeks when we were asked our followers for their burning questions about self-assessment. And here's a few of them that they asked. So number one, how long does self-assessment take? Now, I'll take this one first if you don't mind, but this one is basically how long is a piece of string? It really does come down to that. It's all depends on how complex your tax affairs are. If you only have a few items to include, say just a P60 and a few dividends, then it can literally take 30 minutes from start to finish to get your tax return completed. But on the other hand, if you have multiple businesses and rental properties, well, unfortunately, it's going to take a lot longer. Ultimately, the whole point of self-assessment is to show how much income you had in total for a given tax year. And remember what we're talking about. We're talking about that 6th of April, 2021, all the way to the 5th of April, 2022. So how long it takes typically relates to how much income is spread over that particular period. That's why we always try and push our clients onto software like QuickBooks, as it gives all those automations that Fer's just talked about, and it cuts down that whole preparation time significantly. So if you're a little bit worried about the time it takes to do your tax return, then my opinion is to get yourself onto software sooner rather than later, because that's where really you're going to get all those savings in. Anything else you want to add to that one, Fer?
No, I mean, absolutely. And I think obviously getting sooner rather than later will also help you get prepared for next year. We know that we're focused right now on the current year, but obviously getting set up will help you obviously prepare for the years that actually are to come. So it's never late to just get started, learn how to use the product, and then automate as much as possible so you can basically get work done for you.
Yeah, because it surprises me how much QuickBooks learns as well, doesn't it? So the more data you can feed it, the more intelligent it's going to get, the more time savings you can have. Brilliant. Great question, that one. Can you explain to the next question? Can you explain allowable expenses more? So if I was going to give you a official title from HMRC, it's a little bit long-winded and dull, but it's all revenue, trading expenses must have been incurred wholly and exclusively for the purpose of running the business to be allowable for tax purposes. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But what does that actually mean? Well, the costs must be incurred while actually performing the business or trying to attract more business. And I personally think the simplest way to think about it and to consider typical allowable costs. So if you go through kind of a list of what a typical business would have as allowable costs, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to be able to understand what's allowable and what's not. So here's a kind of typical list that we would go through with our clients and hopefully trying to jog them along and trying to make sure that we're including everything that's allowable. So office costs such as stationery, phone bills, or other items that you use, costs of business premises such as utility bills, rent, repairs incurred, or all that sort of stuff. Travel costs such as potentially fuel, parking, or train tickets. Staff costs such as wages, salaries, and bonus and pensions. You've got legal and financial costs such as credit card charges, overdrafts, even accountants and bookkeeping charges. And then there's things like advertising and marketing costs that a lot of people miss as well. If you think about those are the items that are allowable and include items that you buy to sell, then that should give you a really good indication of what is allowable and what's not. Ultimately, it has to pass that test we talked about. It has to be wholly and exclusively for the business of the trade. and for the purpose of the trade. But as long as you kind of go and look at what typical businesses are claiming for, it's probably going to be your best bet. And again, that's where QuickBooks can help you, because QuickBooks is already going to be using that AI, already going to be given an opportunity to try and guess as best as it possibly can if whatever expense it sees is going to be allowable or not. Anything you want to add to that one, Fer?
Yeah, I think probably just a reflection. Obviously, when we see people struggling with allowables, also is when they've basically been using an bank account that it was meant to be used for personal businesses, and that's where a lot of the work of like taking those transactions out of the books actually comes in. Probably a recommendation more than anything, right? Like you can set up a bank account quite easily within QuickBooks, which, like I mentioned earlier, will automate all of those transactions coming in. If that bank account is solely dedicated for your business, it will make your life so much easier. That being said, in QuickBooks Self-Employed, you can separate what is actually personal and business quite easily as well. But it's probably more a recommendation as well from what we see in our customers and the usage.
Yeah, and in QuickBooks Self-Employed as well, it even takes on some of the more complex areas for you, doesn't it? Like use of home office or mileage against fuel and everything else. So it does a lot there to try and hold your hand, especially if it's that first year and you're a little bit confused about, what I can and can't claim. The whole idea of it is to put it into the right boxes for you so that you can complete that tax return accurately. And also, if there is anything it knows that cannot be allowable, it's just not going to bring them in. So yeah, highly recommend looking into utilizing that part of the software. Okay, what's the next one? So what are the fines for late filing or errors? Well, basically, unfortunately, you're going to get a penalty if you need to send a tax return and you miss the deadline for submitting it. Also, be careful, as you may also get a penalty for not paying your bill on time as well. So the deadline, as we've already said, is the 31st of January, 2023 in this case. That 31st of January is just going to keep on rolling. So next year, for your next tax year, it's going to be there as well. You'll pay a late filing penalty of £100 if your tax return is up to 3 months late, and you'll have to pay more if it's later. So again, if you do have any kind of issues or anything, one of the best things to do is just do make sure you don't miss that deadline, because it could get quite costly in terms of penalties. There's bits in the QuickBooks software to help you, isn't it, to make sure you don't miss those deadlines, isn't there? But
yeah, there are a couple of areas where you get notified of when do you have to pay. We also have in the income tax estimator prompts that basically also reminds you of considerations of what you might need to pay as well. So for example, for sole traders, recently we've launched a widget that notifies them, like, by the way, if you also have property rented out, you might need to complete as well what is like an SA 105 or SA 106 if the property is abroad. So definitely we are ensuring that we notify customers that there's certain things that they need to do by a certain time to avoid late penalties, like you just mentioned, Aaron.
Yeah, and my kind of biggest advice on making sure you don't get those penalties and everything else is just to try not to leave it till the very last moment. Especially with HMRC, there are certain codes and certain login requirements needed, and sometimes there can be a delay in actually getting them to you. Some of them have to come by the post. So please, use this warning, heed the advice, and do make sure that you at least get yourself logged into HMRC, ready to file that tax return sooner rather than later. All right, so now we're going to get to by far my favorite part of the actual talk, and that's actually some listener questions. So first question that we had was Sarah on LinkedIn, and she says, I'm not set up as a business, but make some sales on Etsy and sell to friends. Do I need to worry about this, or is there a minimum requirement? Well, Sarah, first of all, the main important part about sales and how you're going to, or if you need to start recording them, is about the intention to trade. So when it comes to any consideration for if you have to complete a tax return or if you're classed as a business or not a business, it's all going to be down to your consideration of what your intention was when you bought them particular items and sold them on Etsy in this place. Now, if you sell on Etsy and you've bought those items with the intention to actually sell them in the first place and you've bought them, then it does make it sound like that the intention there was to make a profit and therefore was to kind of create a business of some sort. So it does feel like you're hitting that criteria. The other criteria is what I kind of mentioned at the beginning, and that's going to be the amount of sales that you make. So again, this is that top line, how much you've made on Etsy and all other platforms. Well, if that figure goes over £1,000 in a given tax year, remember from 5th of April all the way to the 6th of April, then at that point you will have a requirement to complete a tax return. My personal recommendation to everyone is don't leave it until the last moment until you see if you've gone over that £1,000. But if your intention is to actually make sales, then just get yourself registered for self-employed, get yourself in the ability to, or the cycle of actually completing a tax return. And then basically when it comes to completing the tax return, if you've sold less than £1,000, so again, income, not profit, so the amount of sales you made, if that is under £1,000, then you won't have any requirement to include that aspect on your tax return. And there won't be any taxes associated with either. But also, if you made a loss, for example, then losses are actually really useful and you can carry them forward and use them later time. So I do highly recommend at least applying to become self-employed and having that information on. And I'm sure, like Fer would agree, getting yourself on QuickBooks sooner rather than later would be a great idea. Anything you want to add to that one, Fer?
No, you've summarized it quite well, Aaron. Obviously, you will get a business overview quite easily from many areas within QuickBooks. So making sure that you understand how much, again, like what the income is, what the expenses are, will really understand. You will really be able to understand it from QuickBooks very, very easily. So, like you say, get into QuickBooks, and all of that will basically come quite easily.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that one. We've got another question in. So Quazim on Facebook asked the following. I think this one might be straight for you, Fer. Hey, does QuickBooks have a scheduler? I know you have a Google Calendar and some other apps. If QuickBooks do a scheduler themselves, then it will reduce our workload tremendously.
I don't think there's a scheduler right now. We definitely are working on areas that can help us remind customers in product about like more events, tailored events for them. As an accountant, you definitely can do a lot of that in QuickBooks Online for accountants. So your accountant might be able to create some of those reminders on their end and help you and basically connect with you when those are due. But I don't think there's a scheduler right now.
Yeah, no, not at the moment, is there? But they're right about the idea of connecting their Google Calendar, though. We know a lot of clients who absolutely live and die off that functionality. Yeah, but that could definitely be something for the product team to consider, couldn't it? And the best thing is to put into feedback, isn't it? If you use the feedback section within QuickBooks, that's by far the best place to be able to put any suggestions in and everything else. Sam on Facebook asks the following: are there any discounts for QuickBooks currently? So basically, the simplest answer there is to just go ahead onto QuickBooks website itself, have a look at the price list there, and then you're going to see any discounts or anything available. But they are pretty common, aren't they? For it's kind of there's normally some form of discount, some sort of sale happening at some point in time.
Yeah, definitely. I recommend going to the website. We have there all our different products and prices. You can get free trials as well to try the product out for a month, and then there's also a 90% off for 3 months. I think if you purchase right now, that's the latest one. So definitely there are discounts that will help businesses getting started and trying the product out and just making sure that they see the value that it actually brings to their business.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to talk to accountants as well. A lot of accountants are offering discounted or bundled licenses as well. So most of the time you'll find that you'll be able to get a really good deal on QuickBooks. And I really do struggle to find a client who doesn't find value in what they pay for it. So yeah, there's definitely going to be options out there for you. Great question there, Sam. So Francie on Facebook asks following: are tax returns all reviewed manually? How will they know if we make mistakes? So I'm assuming here, Francie, you're talking about HMRC themselves and how they possibly or do review the tax returns themselves. Now, the simplest way to look at this is HMRC are going to just base the information on what they've been submitted. So if you think about it, HMRC themselves only really get a very small snapshot of what your actual business has done. The tax return themselves is only going to have boxes of data, so numbers, and those boxes are going to relate to basically what's happening in your business. Now, HMRC themselves are pretty much going to be looking at see if there's consistency. So maybe you've had 1 year, you've had a massive amount of income, and the next year you've not shown that income. that could possibly trigger them to want to look into it a little bit more. But ultimately, what you need to do for yourself and to make sure that you're confident in what you're sending over is to make sure that you've got backup for anything that you've sent over. So that again is where QuickBooks can be so useful. You're going to be creating all of your transactions in QuickBooks. QuickBooks is going to tell you what boxes to complete on that tax return that is going to be reviewed and is going to be looked at by HMRC. But ultimately, you're going to have also all the backup information you need to be able to prove where those numbers came from in the first place. And one of my favorite features of QuickBooks is the fact that every transaction you put into QuickBooks, you actually can put an attachment on there. So that means that you have no arguments whatsoever as to where that particular expense may have came from or whatever that information is that you're trying to prove, because you've got the attachment that backs up that transaction itself. So yeah, it's HMRC are very hit and miss, if you like, in terms of what they do review and what they don't. It's all based on them looking at the data that they have, which is very limited. So sometimes it can just be luck of the draw if they're going to do a check on you and do what they call an assessment on you or not. Fer, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, the benefits of using digital software for your taxes is immense, but I think probably one of the ones is just bringing that backup of information in case you get asked by HMRC at some point, right? So ensuring like you have attachments, that you have proof of where the transactions come from, that you have, like you mentioned earlier, Aaron, that reconciliation between the information that is within QuickBooks and the information that is in the bank account that you've connected. All of that has basically as that proof of accuracy in your business accounts, which at the end of the day, if you get audited by HMRC for whatever reason, looking for. So definitely recommend that as highlights and benefits of using QuickBooks.
Yeah, and you mentioned before as well, didn't you, the AI side of things as well, how that's going to help people spot mistakes and spot issues. So, that means that if HMRC was to review your tax return for whatever reason, again, you've got that confidence that at least it's been reviewed by AI, at least it's had that opportunity. And you also said about the fact that accountants can work with clients as well. Well, if you've had that second pair of eyes on it as well, even if it's just a quick check over before it gets submitted, that can give you all the confidence that you need on that one. So yeah, great question there. And I'm sure that's one of the things that people do get more and more worried about is once they press that submit button, what happens next? So yeah, no, great question, that one. All right, let's move over to Twitter then. And Ali on Twitter asks the following: if I use my phone and home office for work and personal, can I claim on them as an expense? Absolutely brilliant question here, Ali. So one thing I'd always recommend to have a look at when you're looking at any form of expenditure within QuickBooks or in your tax return, shall I say, is consider something called personal and business use. So if you do have some sort of personal use for any transaction, not just telephone and home office and all those other costs, and you really should go and consider the fact that if there is some personal use on it, then you might want to consider actually showing that on the transaction itself. Might be doing a percentage or whatever you're going to do to be able to actually prove to HMRC that you've considered that particular expense isn't just for business use, there is a personal element to it. And QuickBooks makes that really easy. We can split transactions. We can do lots of things within QuickBooks so that you are basically making sure that transaction is fairly shown on your tax return. Now, when it comes to telephone and home office, though, it is really one of those areas where there isn't that much personal use there. HMRC are really actually quite generous when it comes to phone costs and everything else, unlike, say, motor expenses, for example, and other elements like that. They're a little bit more generous on mobile phone and home office expenses. So you shouldn't have any major need to go through and do any personal use, mainly because it's so difficult these days. You buy your telephone and you have bundles and bundles of calls. It's very difficult to split what's in those bundles is going to be personal and private use. So you should be absolutely fine on telephone costs, but anything else out there, like especially things like your having things like fuel or motor costs or travel costs, you really do need to consider if there's any personal use on that one. Fer, anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, you can, like you said, Aaron, like you can split transactions easily within QuickBooks if you need to part of a transaction to take it out because it's for personal use, you can do that. I guess probably a reflection as well is, on the other hand, one of the things that we see the most is people not claiming those allowable business expenses, right? When it comes to those that they just forget about. So for example, telephone, etc. So that definitely, like, connect with your accountant to see if the allowable expenses that have been missed in your return that could help you at the end of the day deduct like how much you have to pay back based on the income generated of your business.
Great advice, that one. Brilliant. Okay, let's move back to Facebook then. And Carlos on Facebook asks the following: how can I know if I'm being taxed too much or how much to expect? Well, first of all, Carlos, as first said, and one of the great innovations within QuickBooks lately is that brand new solution where at any point you can go and find out what your estimate tax bill is going to be. So on that bit of how much to expect, that is going to be by far your best tool out there. Now in real time what your tax return is an absolute game changer in my opinion. But being known if you're taxed too much, well, we've kind of talked about a lot of these situations already. The idea of making sure that you've claimed enough expenses, that could be absolutely huge. The idea of making sure that everything you've included in your tax return is allowable or not allowable, that again can have a massive impact on it. When it comes to being known if you tax too much, then other than actually getting a third person to actually look at it, like an accountant, for example, then your best option really would be is just to go and make sure that you are putting all those allowable expenses in. Sometimes one of the things I would recommend you do is use that whole idea of what the boxes you're going to complete on your tax return, so all those different expense categories that are there, and use that almost like a checklist. See if there are any of those expenses on there that relate to you. Ideally, for a business, you should be able to fill majority of those boxes in there, and that's going to give you an indication if you may have missed anything or not. Again, QuickBooks is also going to hold your hand a little bit on that one and help you push through from that one. Fer, anything else you want to add on that one? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the estimates that we generate, obviously, you can come back to previous years and see those estimates as well. So it's quite easy as well to, for example, see the estimate for like the year 21, 22, and then see, well, actually, let me see what I made in the year 2021. And then that figure is there for reassurance as well, which can help you other mistakes or things that might have been missed or things that are wrongly categorized, besides what we've already spoken around the AI uses that we have within product. But all of that is just one click away, so that I can give you that reassurance and confidence that the figure for the estimated tax you for that income, which is obviously the income that you have in QuickBooks, it's what you should expect.
Yeah, 100%. And Tarek on Facebook kind of asks a similar-ish question about paying too much tax. And it's any other expense examples other than phone, fuel, travel, hotels? The rules seem very grey, and is there a full list? Well, unfortunately, every business is different. So there's not a definitive list of every expense available for you. But again, if you're using QuickBooks, one of the things I would highly recommend people do is just have a look at what's called the chart of accounts. So within your settings area on the left-hand panel, there's accountant, there's chart of account. And that gives you an indication of what kind of expenses we're expecting to see, or at least QuickBooks has got set up ready to be able to put into their tax return properly for you. And I use that, and I would highly recommend clients use that as an opportunity to go through, get yourself familiar with that chart of account and see, again, is there anything on that list that would relate to your business? When you're seeing costs in there, that could easily trigger in there the opportunity for a cost that you may not have actually been able to incur. One we always find is things like internet costs, like your internet costs going through, or you having new computer equipment, things like that. They're the ones where clients can go through, see that list of chart of accounts to be able to go, actually, yeah, there is actually a bit of computer equipment I'm using going forward. Any other advice you'd have on that one, Fer?
I guess ask an expert, right? So within QuickBooks, there is a network of accountants that would be very, very useful to in that support, right? Like in terms of reviewing your preparation and helping you ensure that, again, that coming back to there are no mistakes and that you've put the things in the right place. So all of that can be easily accessed within QuickBooks, and like we've already talked about, you can give them access to your business so that they can almost like view the business as if you were, and ensure that and spot all those mistakes and help you with that preparation end of the day.
Perfect. Great advice there. Jason on LinkedIn has got the next question. It says, will HMRC ever ask for copies of my receipts? Do they need access to QuickBooks or my bank account? I cannot find info on this anywhere. Well, ultimately, yes, QuickBooks do need, or QuickBooks, HMRC do need you to keep copies of your receipts. There is a ruling of how long you should keep them, and I would highly recommend you look into making sure you are compliant with that one. The good news is, though, that it doesn't have to be the actual receipt itself. It can be a digital copy, and again, this is why QuickBooks shines really, because it does give you the opportunity to take a photograph of that, as Fer was saying, with using that receipt capture technology. Take a photo on your phone, get it uploaded to QuickBooks, means you don't have to worry about it as much. Now, HMRC don't have a right to go into your QuickBooks, and they don't have to go into QuickBooks, but you do have the option to work with them. And if you were to be investigated for any reason, we've had clients have the same thing, where you can have or give them access to QuickBooks One, or you can take copies of the data that they want to see. So maybe they want an extract of a particular account, for example, where you can take that copy of that extract and you can provide it to them. It's completely up to you, or working with HMRC in terms of what's best to go on from there. Fer, anything you want to add to that one?
No, just super easy, obviously, to take those photos or upload an actual image from your computer. So maybe as a habit, just prompting customers that they always, because it's going to live there, right? So moving away from those paper receipts that obviously take a lot of space, and they just get erased over time, and moving into something that is just kept as a digital record, which at the end of the day is so much simpler.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. One of the other questions we got from Grace on Facebook, and she asked following: I've been freelancing for 3 years and now rent out my second property. How do I include both of these on my return next year, or should I be filing that separately? This is a really good point where people get very, very confused about the whole tax return system. The idea of your tax return is that it should include every aspect of your income. So if you have, like in this case, you've got rental property and you've got the ability to have your self-assessment or your sole trader income as well, then both of those forms of income are actually going to have to go onto your tax return. Now, HMRC does make this really easy for you. When you go and do your first tax return, they give a checklist for you where you get to say to HMRC what types of income you've had. And then basically you'll then be asked and be required to complete those elements of it as well. So what I would suggest you do is, if it's next year that you're going to be completing this, is just making sure that when you come to do this year's, or if you've not done this yet, or if you have a look at it, just have a look at that checklist that comes up at that beginning. On that checklist, you'll notice there is the ability to be able to put rental income in as well. And then once you have allocated that or switched that feature on in the HMRC's portal, then when it comes to your tax return, you're going to be asked more questions related to that rental side. But the big part that everyone should really take away from this is that when you're completing your tax return, you have to include every aspect of income that you've had within that tax year. And once you've done it the first time and you've seen it, I promise you, you'll get your head around it from there. Further, is there any way that QuickBooks can help in any way on that one?
Yeah, so basically, obviously, you can create, you can customize the chart of accounts. So they could potentially add something there, but unfortunately, right now, there's not something that we support. It is something that is in the roadmap when it comes to ITSA, which we know is a big topic. But right now, the business is focused either on if you're a sole trader or if you are a landlord.
Brilliant. Wonderful. I think we've just got time for one more, haven't we? We're just coming towards the end of it. So a really quick one here. John Stephen on LinkedIn asked following: I filed last year and got fined. Can I ask an accountant just to look over everything I've done for this year, or will they want to start again? Basically, first of all, sorry that you got fined last year and you filed late. That's not good at all. And yeah, certainly that's what accountants are here for. We don't have to do all the work from start to finish. A lot of us accountants now are providing solutions for you so that you can have the ability to be able to just have that peace of mind as well. And that's where QuickBooks works really well. So as an accountant, I have faith that if I see someone I've never seen before in terms of their tax return or anything else, I can use QuickBooks and I can go through and I can find maybe gaps or issues or problems, because QuickBooks gives me as the accountant the tool to be able to look for those and to be able to go through and be able to find any issues or anything else. We found a lot of times doing that where we've been able to help clients or, people who just want to have a little check of their data. And it's all thanks really to the tools that QuickBooks give us to do that. Anything you want to add to that, Per?
No, I think, Aaron, you've mentioned it, you've commented quite well. Obviously, we make it quite easy to work with an accountant. It's a software that is quite easy for the customer as well to use it, but also it's quite easy to interact with that person that is there to support you if actually needed. So definitely encourage that if that's a requirement that you think you need for your business, definitely take advantage of that connectivity between the accountant and the business that exists within product.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just simply that extra pair of eyes, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily have to be a qualified accountant. Just having someone have that extra pair of eyes can be really beneficial to make sure you're not missing anything. And that's it. Well, thank you to every single one of you for tuning in today. If you have any more questions or need any further advice, then please do consider joining the official Intuit SMB community group on Facebook. Accountant and business expert just like myself are on hand 24/7. And if you want to get in touch with me or email me, then please use the email address hello@boffix.com or head over to my YouTube channel, The QuickBooks Chap. We've really enjoyed answering your questions this afternoon, and thank you for joining us. And to all of you who've turned in, have a great weekend. Cheers.